Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dead Unicorn. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dead Unicorn. My name is Corey. It's the Tabletop Role-Playing Game Club, and I'm here with Tarek, and we are again talking about Legend of the Five Rings, the Fantasy Flight Edition, the Edge version of the game, whatever company has it. Some people call it 5th edition, but we don't, because that kind of, like, the 5th edition, when you say 5e, everybody thinks Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, 5e compatible is synonymous with, it works with Dungeons & Dragons, right?
Which this does not.
Yeah, so I usually call it the Fantasy Flight version.
Go figure.
Some people call it the Red Book or the Red branding. I'm fine with that.
Red, black, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what happened our last, because what we do here, what this live stream is about, is we're taking this book, and it's been out now for like 8 years now.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah. And we enjoy this edition, but we see all of the cracks and flaws in it, and we think
especially carrying over from other editions.
It's time for it to turn into something new. I think it's time for the next edition. And while I know there are naysayers out there that are like, no, all of the clan books have to come out before a new edition comes out, it's time. I'm sorry if your favorite clan didn't get a book. Mind you, we are not associated with Edge Studio or Fantasy Flight Games at all. We are just fans telling what we would like to see in the next edition, making house rules for ourselves. That's all it is.
And comments on the things we have experienced through playing this game for, the last 8 years.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of opinions. And our experiences may not be your experiences, which is why we really depend on your comments, talking to us, so our bubble is broken. And we did get some comments on our last live video, and I want to talk about those before we jump into our what we're going to talk about today, which is conditions and terrains. We're gonna redo bleeding today. That's a must.
Yeah.
But first, our last video was about opportunities, which is, this is a quagmire. This is controversial. The first thing that everybody talked about was that the rules in the back of the book for opportunities are examples. They're optional, right? But no.
They're really not.
It's what we all default back to, especially when the game master constantly, for every single roll, has to figure out what he thinks people can spend their opportunities on, which is a really huge endeavor, because you're always giving extra bonuses, giving extra benefits, right? Yeah. So it's like, hey, is there anything I can spend opportunity on to give me more cool things? And as a game master, you're just kind of struggling. What can I do in this? They're climbing a tree. What else can I give them? You can spend an opportunity to get a piece of fruit on your way.
It's supposed to feel like you're accomplishing something a little extra, or flavor and spice up that roll that you just made, but trying to do that on every single roll, whether there's relevance or necessity to the roll or not, and then whether there's anything that's extra that you can give, either as a actual mechanical benefit or a narrative benefit, it's just a lot to keep track of. And if you do take it as just these are just optional suggestions for what those things might be, who knows how long it's going to take you to come up with something, or reference charts and find the thing that is going to be best for that situation or most relevant to that situation. And everyone who's a player wants to make sure that they choose the best one that's going to give them the most bang for their buck, the number of opportunities they have. And if you're newer to playing it, or your players aren't as familiar with all of the breadth of books, you compile a list of them, they're going to go through that list exhaustively and pull from areas that they might not even be relevant and try to use those. Like it's just a lot to go through, and unless you have a lot of ground rules put into place ahead of time, it's gonna be a time sink in one way or another.
I mean, younger Corey and Tarek, we would spend hours. We would have all day gaming sessions, in which case it's not much of a problem. But nowadays we game for just a few hours every week, and we want to maximize our enjoyment of, we want to get things moving, do things cool,
keep things going.
Yeah. Like if
get through plot points,
especially if you're sitting at a table and somebody like is trying to find the best opportunity, it's their time and you're not doing anything, and you may already have your action sorted out, but you still don't know opportunities and things like that. It makes it hard to do things in advance. Mind you,
it really does make it harder to plot out your turn too, because something that another player might do right before your turn might dramatically change what you are able to or what you want to do on your turn at that point. So now you got to reconfigure everything and figure out what your opportunities are going to be after that, and like it's just a lot.
We put it upon ourselves to just condense the opportunities list into something a little more manageable, something you can see at with a glance and can be used in every situation, not just things on certain stances, right? You can just go, this is it. This is our little graph, and everything else can be put into techniques. And that was our goal. And we did have, I got an interesting comment. Where is it? The surprising thing, which ones were perceived as problem waste, were so different between your group and mine. Most narrative detect notice opportunities were the ones my players used most often.
Yeah. The surprising thing is which ones are perceived as problem or waste.
Yeah. So he agrees that opportunities slow the game down. And awkwardly interact with techniques. But the ones he uses and ones our game uses are different, or the ones that we perceive as. And I thought, like, the ones to perceive other people's advantages and disadvantages, we didn't think as problematic. We just thought they should be shuji, that they are like techniques.
Yeah, exactly. These are techniques. They don't need to be just an opportunity expenditure, because they reproduce what people's techniques and shujis already do, or would better be represented as part of a technique that somebody could take, which would also limit the number of people who are going to be doing that every time. And we don't find those as like things that we are wasteful or like problematic, because in our game sessions that are live streamed here, you can go and watch. Those tend to be the most often used opportunities when we're making rolls, is like, tell me something, a detail in the scene that I hadn't seen before, or something that, are there ghosts present, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Young So does that one a lot. So like we get it. Those are the more kind of meatier options a lot of times, especially with like the let me know their strife, let me know their honor rank, let me know their advantages and disadvantages. Those come into play heavily. And we'll give you a lot more like detail, but it is incumbent on the GM to then make those up on the spot. And if they don't have something plotted out already for that, they can be just like, this dude has a strange like muddiness on his kimono, and then that could be some kind of clue that your players latch onto as like, oh, he was in the mud, that must mean that there's something. And there was just like a detail that you were just trying to throw out there because it was like unnecessary.
So, and of course some people are going to be like, oh, but that can lead into really cool gameplay later on if blah, blah, blah. Not all of us are awesome game masters that can do that.
Yeah. And even if you are, that may derail from the plot that you were going through to begin with. And then how do you balance it? Like it adds a lot more effort on the part of the GM to kind of manage all of those things, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's just something that you're gonna have to be prepared for, and that will or can eat up more time at the gaming table, right? It's going to
Yeah.
to lead to different areas where you're still going to be spending more and more time invested in trying to resolve these, when you could spread them out a lot thinner and still make them as impactful by just putting them as techniques. Like, I don't see that that's a problem.
One of the things I discussed in our first rewrite, and we didn't discuss it in the opportunity section, is instead of things going positive for the characters, which is harder to put down, was consequences. So whenever a character makes a roll, instead of the game master saying a bunch of positive things that could happen, you could put down a bunch of negative things that could happen. Like, and those are consequences. And these are things that will happen unless you spend opportunity to negate them. Right? So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
exactly.
think that's a really interesting way of handling opportunities, to like make them more punchy in the moment. Um, because I agree, like me and Sasha have talked about this a lot, and um, so the biggest problem we see with opportunities is that the way that they're set up in the books and in everything requires you to know about them ahead of time and like really have an encyclopedic understanding of them in the middle of gameplay. Like mid gameplay, if you don't want to bog up the game or like slow things down, you have to already have known it and then apply it to your thing. And there's a better way of going about that. And I think making it so that there's an immediately useful use of opportunities that's easily addressable um, in the middle of gameplay makes that a much faster
I
experience, because
agree.
it gives you something to offload those opportunity on, and you don't have to bog down in the book
And
to be like, oh, what else can I do? And if you want to, if you have opportunities on techniques or shujis or whatever, you can use those still in the moment really punchily, because they're right there on your character
so
sheet. You
giving the
know what
game
you have on.
master a tool that also goes positive and negative, I think can help open up a whole new world of opportunity for a game master to riff on and make that, oh, you're climbing up a rope. Okay, well, you're going to get a little rope burn on your skin, which is going to cause 2 fatigue unless you spend an opportunity to negate
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Even if you succeed in
Um,
your roll.
yeah, I
Consequence.
like consequences and like benefits coming from the like roles inherent, like inherently within a role. I also feel like the same thing can be done. Do you remember back in like third edition, and I think a little bit in fourth edition they did this, which is when you rolled a skill check, there were little details in the skill of like what you could do with this skill, and here are the different options that you have. Here are specialties in those skills that give you even better bonuses, and
That
at
was
certain
4th
skill
edition.
ranks.
They were mastery
Well, it was
abilities.
third edition had the same thing, mastery abilities, where in the mastery ability you get bonuses or penalties to checks, or give penalties to checks based on like your level of mastery of the skill and what specialties you took. And I feel like that idea, it doesn't necessarily need to be a one-to-one translation, but that idea of like really fleshing out what your skills are doing for you could in it, like in and of itself, provide an opportunity for opportunities to be condensed into skill checks, right? So if you are making skill checks, here are opportunities that are specific to these skills that might give you bonuses, or give the GM ideas for here's how bonuses and penalties can be made to those, in the same vein of these consequences and benefits that get happening in your roles, right? Like you have a 5 and you're they don't have like the courtier skill anymore, right? They have courtesy and culture and government and all these different skills that are going to be used in place of those older skills. But I feel like there's a one-to-one there, that you could be like, okay, well, if you're making a government check here, you could spend an opportunity to avoid some of the excess bureaucracy of trying to fill out your paperwork or something like that. Or like the duration of time that's going to take to get this
That,
through your
that's already
recommendations through.
covered by some. It's already covered by some. Like there's one opportunity that says you do things faster under crafting, but it's like only on a certain stance and a certain like that's one of the problems is, oh, are you
Exactly.
on the right stance for that? And I think our way of doing it, where it doesn't matter what stance you're on, you can do them all. It just takes one extra opportunity on if you're not on the right stance.
Exactly.
I think that makes more sense.
Or
um
on the right, not even just the right stance, but like the right approach,
yeah.
right? What ring you're using to make the check.
Yes. Let's so we have this document. I'm putting it up on the screen right now.
Mhm.
That has all of basically what we've come up with. And if you are a patron member, you can access it, patreon.com/deadunicorn. And you can access this and you can make comments um, on the post, saying what you like and dislike. We're open to suggestions. We're always open to suggestion. What you like,
Please
and
send
on
it
our
in.
Discord, we had somebody come in and say, "Hey guys, I think opportunities are wonderful, and I don't think you should get rid of them." And it's just like we're not getting. I promise, we're not getting rid of them.
Yeah.
We think they have a great amount of potential. We just think that maybe they're not living up to that. Johnny Rico says, I ended up allowing my players to create an opportunity pool where they can save and bank them in a scene to be used later to quicken things up. As a balance, I would
Ooh.
raise TNs or add complications. Excellent. I like that idea.
Yeah,
I
that's an awesome idea.
I did an
It works the
opportunity
best.
pool in one of our L5R runs when I said, if you store up like uh, it was either like 5 or 10 opportunity. If you get like 10 opportunities stored up, you get a void point, and all of those opportunity go
Yeah.
away. Um, so today we're gonna do conditions. Let's get to it. I think we should just dive right in with bleeding, right?
Oh
So,
yeah. I guess we can start with that. Yeah.
Tarek, can you open up
By
the?
the way, before that, is there any other comments that you wanted to address? Any other people that had a particular, or was that basically
Um, let's
the general
see.
complaint that we wanted to address?
Opportunities seem to be a sort of disconnect with intent as written on the page and how it's actually implemented. Page 28 of the core rulebook describes opportunity as a mainly narrative tool. Then you discover actions and techniques that make use of opportunities for mechanical effect, and that's fine. But then there's a huge list in the back of the book.
Yeah.
But it does say examples. I've been thinking of allowing opportunities only for actions, techniques, or descriptive purposes, and the general use on 328, or maybe raising the cost of mechanical effects by 2 opportunities at a minimum to reduce the analysis paralysis moments. But that's
Hmm.
just a patch. Like it is like
It
they
is. It
think
is
it's the
really just a
jankiest
patch.
part of the system. It
Like
it is.
the one of the things that I was thinking about before we even got into all of this stuff was I don't know if you remember this, but in our old, we used to do it, like Corey said, an all day game session of L5R. It was like 8 hours once a week, where we would go and play this like L5R, big group of people. It was everybody was very invested in it. But one of the things that the GM did that I liked was when you made a skill check, like especially if you were investigating or doing some kind of intrigue scene or social scene, you could spend like raises, right? You claimed raises and you increased your TN by 5 for each raise you were going to claim. And as if you made that TN, you got to these increments of 5 that you raised it by counted as a raise that you could then spend to do something interesting. Kind of like, you know, opportunities in this sense, right? And other games have their own kind of version of this. Well, one of the things they did was say if you had a certain number of raises and you only needed one to do the thing that you really wanted to do, what are you going to do with the rest of the raises that you did? They would give you this like pool of saying like spend the rest of them to get more information or spend the rest of them to like do my thing subtly. So it has some of the feel of like these opportunities, these more general use opportunities that we have here. But it does require the GM to like have details to give you. But in that sense, I feel like there should be a general opportunity thing of just like spend your excess opportunities to get whatever extra information the GM wants to give you about the plot at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just opens up an opportunity for the GM to be like, hey, here's all the things that you guys missed in the session previously, and I'm just going to give you that information now. As some like part of your investigation, you start to piece together those pieces of information or remember them out of order or whatever. And this is a way to get that plot relevant detail to you. And I think that's an interesting way of like simplifying things. This was before we went ahead and made our list of new opportunities and kind of this new framework for thinking about them. But I think that was another way to just patch this of like, hey, if you're struggling to figure out what to do with your opportunities, just spend them and I'll give you some extra detail, or I'll make it so that you did this really cool flip in the middle of the air and landed all cool, so it sounds
but then people will be like, is that worth glory? Did I get glory now?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe two of those were to do the flip, and one of them was to do actually.
I don't know. On rolls that I'll give you glory on this, but rolls you don't do do the big flip, I guess you're getting negative glory.
No,
you're getting less glory. You're losing glory now when you do things boringly.
Wants to do the flip. You need to do the flip every time. You gotta you gotta push the limits, push those boundaries.
Okay. Someone asked, is this the red label book or the black label book? Of course, it's the red label book. And and what's so wrong with the D&D World book for Rokugan? What's so wrong with Adventures in Rokugan? If we don't like this game, if we think we need to rewrite it, why don't we just go over to Adventures in Rokugan, right? I mean, that seems reasonable on its face. There's another game system that uses these rules. Or uses this world, should I say, world. And the problem is both of these game systems have entirely different feels and different focuses. The Red Book has more of a focus on politics, different clans, different intrigue, investigation,
war.
Yes. Yeah. While Adventures in Rokugan is about exploration. Right? And
it's dungeon crawling.
So I also think that in the Red Book, there's a larger, it's more mysterious in the Red Book. All of these things, Oni and ghosts and Tengu and ratlings and everything. They're all mysterious and weird and interesting to interact with.
Cultures, yeah.
And in D&D and in the Adventures in Rokugan book, they're just that's Ralph over there, Ralph the Ghost.
We hang out all the time. Ralph the Ghost, Jimmy the Ogre. We're all cool.
We're all cool, and we walk into village and we walk into the village to help the villagers, and nobody thinks that's weird.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh yeah, you just have a ghost companion. We all have those. They're just a normal race that you can play.
It's D&D brain, and I feel like D&D brain infects so many game systems nowadays, where it's completely normal for you to have this weird shadow elf being that has this magic that is sourced from an evil god, and he walks into the village and is just like, hey, is there any bounties I can go on today? And the villagers was like, hell yeah, Jimmy got robbed a couple weeks ago and you need to go and track down the bandit who did it. And then he goes and sucks the soul out of this bandit, and they're like, oh yay, you saved us, here's money. And nobody freaks out about any of this.
You're kind of putting that in a negative light, but that's fucking fun, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that shit.
It is D&D. It is quintessentially a D&D kind of mindset for a game where that kind of stuff can happen, and it happens all the time, and it's perfectly fine in the world. But when you go to another system like L5R, which is based on more cultural identities and intrigue and politics, and it's very removed from the idea of this super high fantasy anything goes kind of situation, you can start to see where that world setting breaks down and just becomes another generic D&D world. Right? It's just the generic D&D. Here's some flavor for if you wanted to play
And
samurais
they
there,
they
and that's it.
de-emphasized clan and clan affiliation in Adventures of Rokugan 2. I mean, they're
Mhm.
backgrounds. So
Yeah,
you can have them, but really, like, it doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Um,
any of it
so
matter?
that's basically why we don't use Adventures in Rokugan. If you love it and you think it's great, dude,
More power to you.
I see that. I understand. Especially like the rule set. It's D&D, everybody knows it. Go have fun. Um
And it gives you a lot of new classes and stuff to play around with in D&D. Like, who doesn't want that? More customization options,
you
more
can just
crazy
grab
things.
monsters from the D&D handbook, throw them in Rokugan. Who cares?
Yeah, we
that
got an
said,
aboleth now. Deal with it.
that said, it's not for us. We like this one. This is what we like.
Yeah,
Does L5R have an OGL or something similar for you to turn that project into something commercial? No.
I wish.
No. This
I
has to be
wish.
a fan project.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all we
I,
can
I
do.
I would love it if they did have an OGL. That would make our life easier, and we would be running with so many different L5R
Oh,
projects you couldn't
there
even
would
imagine.
be I I would be putting out L5R stuff every month. It would be a deluge of things that you would
And
just
not just us. We know so many people in the community, the L5R community, who would be doing the same thing all the time.
yeah.
I used to be part of the like a group of people, a whole forum that was dedicated to like improving the rule system of L5R back in the day, from third edition to fourth edition. And they were just putting out content constantly. That was just behind the scenes. If you wanted to use it, this is homebrew mechanics of stuff. And yeah, we were very intense. And so the fan group, the fan base here for L5R is, if they were allowed to publish their content out and like make a buck off of it, like Drive Through RPG would be full of it, just everywhere, all of
So the last one, and this is the like a really you're gonna like this comment here, Tarek. I
it.
appreciate the in-depth discussion, but did I miss the discussion of the dichotomy of the power level of a yes and versus an actual success, and how much opportunity needed to be viable even on a failure, or is that another potential video? So
Ooh, that's
opportunities
interesting.
cannot make up for failures. They just simply
Yes,
can't in this game. That
yeah,
said,
you really can.
opportunities can be damned critical, damned critical in what you're doing depending on the technique you're using. And I respond to this person by saying path to inner peace. If you
Oh
cast
yeah,
path to inner
huge.
peace and to get rid of the bleeding condition, you need an opportunity to get rid of that bleeding condition.
Hmm. Otherwise, you're just healing fatigue and not really addressing any of the root causes, and not just like lightly wounded. If you're lightly wounded, if you did your medicine check to downgrade a severe wound into a light wound, and then you're trying to heal out that light wound so you can keep battling and doing stuff in that moment, you need those opportunities. Otherwise, you're screwed. That person's gonna still be injured. That person's gonna still be bleeding. And it's only a one success like technique, and failing that technique and getting the opportunities feels even worse. Like, oh god, I only had opportunities on this thing and I can't really use them. Like that kind of
So
situation is burdensome.
So he says in response, I'm getting why you're saying that. I think it's something that can be expanded upon in a video about potentially new edition, actually. So he thinks that opportunities should be able to make up for a failure, which I know a lot of people want to do. They see all these opportunities and they're like, I still failed, but I got a lot of opportunity. I think that's just a disconnect from this
Making
kind of a game, which is a little different.
making it making it not a success, but making it somehow still rewarding to have made that check, failed, and spent a bunch of opportunity is a very like delicate balance to hit. And it's not necessarily something you can predict as a game developer of what you can do in that instance, because it's probably going to be very circumstantial
And
of what is happening in that scene. But I contend that a GM could, if you gave a pool of opportunity to a GM and said, hey, I have 5 opportunity on this check, I didn't get a single success, but I feel like I should be able to mitigate some of the cost of failure somehow, or spend
so
this to do some side grade, where it's not necessarily a success, but it still gets me closer to my ultimate goal. Might be something you can work out with your GM.
That's why that
and
list at the back of the book is so damned important.
Yeah.
Right? Because now you can be like, well, I can aid another person on their check. Even though I failed mine, my failure goes forward to help somebody as an assist.
Yeah.
Right?
And I can get rid of some of my strife and some of my friends' strife because I have so much extra stuff, and maybe I'm supporting the people around me.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You have side grade opportunities where you could still make some kind of progress, but it's not in the same direction.
Exactly. That's what opportunity are supposed to be for. So he also says the goals one has for opportunity could change, so defining the goal of your version would be helpful. They are potentially totally different use of opportunities for invocations versus Shuji's and Kata, but the current game plasters over the difference, presumably for class balance goals. So that is true on generic ones, but the ones there are embedded opportunities inside Kata. Some Kata are just a new opportunity that you get. Shuji's and invocations. I'm totally okay with streamlining the system to avoid the opportunity per context per stance you got going, but for players like me who only played 5th edition, I feel like I'm missing context in your rewrite, either from that or from Bleed or other systems I played, Exalted, Stunt Dice, Momentum Threat from 2D20 Dune.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we're pulling obviously we have a lot of influences that are helping us kind of,
and we've talked about that in our first video.
Yeah, but there is the ultimate goal that we have for opportunities was basically trying to streamline this down into a way that would make it easier for players and GMs to know what they can do without having to stop the game and like peruse a list. Simplifying some of the ones that are there that feel redundant or like they should be something else, and removing those out of the game. And I think that is ultimately our goal, is to make this a much easier experience to digest than like just grok. And there is still going to be contextual opportunities, right? You're still going to have techniques and stuff that are going to need to have opportunities attached to them. But ideally, those would be on your character sheet. You'd know about those ahead of time.
Our list doesn't like get rid of the idea of opportunities as something you can just riff on. It does is replace the example opportunities with these example opportunities. That's all we're trying to do. Speaking of this and bleeding and the bleeding condition, we spent a half an hour going through these comments. We've got to get to the rules making.
Yeah, let's get to some rules making.
So the first condition is bleeding, and the problem with bleeding is you can do infinite bleed checks until you die.
Which is, yeah.
So let's read what bleeding says. I'm going to put this up go back here, and I'm just going to read bleeding. Description: the character is losing blood internally or externally. Effects: when a bleeding character makes a check, they suffer physical damage equal to strife symbols on their kept dice, ignoring resistances. This is not how much strife you take, but kept strife symbols. That's a very important distinction.
Yeah, what's on the dies that you're keeping.
So even if you're on void stance and you're not taking strife, you kept a strife symbol, you still take that bleeding damage. Each time damage inflicted this way causes the character to suffer a critical strike. The severity of the critical strike is treated as being equal to the character's current fatigue, which means the healthier you are, the more bleeding will kill you. So if oh, I'm so tough, I got 20 fatigue. Well, or I got 20 endurance, so I can take up to 20 fatigue without going down. Well, now you're at 18 fatigue, or 18, you have 18 fatigue on you. You're going to take a critical strike at 18 because you're so...
Good luck. Yeah.
It's the same thing. Tough. It's the same. I've had this huge problem with Dungeons and Dragons about that. About, Cure Light Wounds. It's just like, oh, I am the most hardy person with a 24 constitution. Nobody can really bring me down because I have so many hit points. Oh, well...
But nobody can heal you.
Nobody can heal you. It's like, well, I have Cure Light Wounds, and oh, well, that did almost nothing to me. But there's this beggar over here.
Cool
There's this guy who's been living on the streets and is such poor health. Go over there and cast Cure Light's Wounds on him. Wow, I can dance now. Woo! Yeah. I'm at full HP.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, there's obvious deficiencies here that can only be, the only way you can fix that is by modifying these checks somehow based on the person's, who you're healing's constitution or something like that. But they don't want to complicate the game.
It's removed
I feel like old school D&D, 3rd edition D&D or something like that you could have gotten away with adding some kind of modifier that increases or decreases your healing abilities or your damage abilities based on the constitution of the
constitution of the target. Yeah.
No chance that's gonna happen nowadays. It's too much math for people. They're gonna be like, we're gonna lose all of our people, all of our players, because
also the nostalgia fiends will throw a fit if you change anything of that like, I don't like this healing stuff now. I remember when it was simpler back in the day, like,
yeah. Remember when you could just cast Cure Wounds and it would, all of your troubles would go away by getting 4 hit points back?
There are certain things about Dungeons and Dragons that is still embedded in the system that they don't need anymore. Like the 3 to 18, they don't need that anymore. That can just go the frick away. But no, they have to have it because it's not Dungeons and Dragons without.
I mean, yeah, L5R has a similar problem in the Constitution area where you're looking at, like, even old school L5R where it was like based on your Earth ring was how many wounds you would get, and your Water ring would determine how much you would heal and stuff like that. Like, similar problems. Let's say you're the toughest man on the planet in 3rd edition L5R, but you have a Water of 2. Every day that you sleep, you get 2 hit points back. Like, you're not getting anywhere soon. You're gonna be in an infirmary for way longer than the guy with an Earth of 2, because that dude's gonna be back up and running.
Okay. So bleeding. When removed, any character at range 0 to 1 of a bleeding character may make a TN2 medicine earth check as a support action to remove the bleeding condition. Okay. So here's our biggest problem with bleed. That critical strike. So people have interpreted this rule in 2 ways, and it has to do with inflection. Are you ready? Each time damage inflicted this way causes the character to suffer a critical strike, or each time damage inflicted this way causes the character to suffer a critical strike. So
each time damage inflicted this way causes the character to, like, it's either you're putting the emphasis either on each time. So each time you take the damage, it causes the character to take a critical hit. Or each time the damage itself causes the critical hit. Right?
Exactly.
Which one is it? Yeah.
But the thing is you can't make the damage cause a critical hit. Because the only way damage causes a critical hit is A, when somebody uses a strike and spends 2 opportunity to make it a critical hit, or B, you are incapacitated, in which case you can't roll dice, and therefore you cannot keep strife symbols.
Yeah.
That's it. Unless you are resisting something, which means you take a critical hit and then you keep a strife on that critical hit, which means you take another critical hit, which means you keep a strife, and then we go through the infinite critical strike
tree.
So,
which happened to one of our players in a recent game on the channel.
Yeah,
where they kept strife on their critical hit resistance and took another one.
So let's change this. Let's figure out how to. Do you have any ideas? I'm going to ask you first because I have some things, but I want to hear what you have to say. Are you in the document?
Yeah, I'm in the document and I'm looking at the book right now. So if I'm looking at the book,
page 271.
I imagine bleeding could be simplified in that it will add damage to you every turn, instead of only triggering on a check. And if you take damage and you're unconscious, you then take critical strikes with like it just automatically, if you take damage while incapacitated in this way before you're healed of bleeding, you will take a critical strike equal to the amount of fatigue that you have.
So
Right?
I like where you're going. I like where you're headed. I think damage should be every round too as you're bleeding, but I think there should be a way to mitigate it. So I'm thinking every round a character takes one fatigue, or it could be two. I'm just writing one for now. Right, like I said, this document is a rough draft. Anything can change as we go through this, and of course, we want our viewers to make suggestions.
Give us your heads up.
So every round, a character takes one fatigue, unless they spend an opportunity on their action, or take no action at all.
No action other than like holding pressure on the wound or whatever.
No action other than stifling the bleeding. So you take one fatigue every round. If a character takes a critical strike, because remember, if you take a critical strike if you take any strike while incapacitated, it becomes critical. So if a character takes a critical strike, critical strike, the deadliness
is increased by like 1 or 2.
Increased by 5. I think 5 is.
Oh, I like that too. 5 is good.
5 is a good number. Because 10 is what happens when you're unconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5 being the bleed. Yep.
And I think that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, because that will count if you take a strike while you're unconscious as well.
I think there needs to be one more thing that is involved with this. I think there should be some sort of like, oh my god, he's bleeding and unconscious. If unconscious, I can't spell. Unconscious, the character will take one fatigue as normal, and if their fatigue equals double their endurance, they gain dying 1. And that's it.
And they're dying, and each turn after that, their dying increases by 1. Until, because it's dying 1, dying 2, and then dying 3, right?
No, dying 3. If you're dying 3, that means you have 4 rounds actually. But so that it decreases by 1. So giving them dying 1.
I'm thinking the opposite direction.
Giving them dying 1 just means they die the next turn.
Yeah. If something doesn't happen, they die the next turn. I like that. That's perfect.
Yep.
It makes bleeding consequential. It makes it urgent. Like you can't keep walking around while bleeding. You're gonna just bleed out at a certain.
And if somebody's down while they're bleeding, people are gonna be like, "Oh, we need to help that guy."
We need to get them up as soon as possible and stop their bleeding, or at least heal their fatigue, because this also gives a fatigue component of double your fatigue. Yes. So you have a little bit of leeway to let them, but they're going to continue taking that fatigue every turn. So the longer you wait on them, the more likely it is they die. And 2, if you're able to at least manage the fatigue that they're taking, eventually you can get them to a place where they might be able to be safe.
And it's removed as normal.
Yeah. Clearly, you cannot be left alone.
No, it's not worse. I think it's actually better because you don't have. Sasha made a comment of, "Are we making bleeding worse?
Are you evil?
Are we evil and crazy?" I don't think that we're making it worse. I think we're making it more reasonable and less likely to cause you to instantly spiral to your death in a turn or 2.
I think so too.
Like, I think this makes it a lot more reasonable, and it makes it also viable to use as a player against your enemies, to really force your enemies to consider whether they're going to heal their allies and keep them from dying in a bleeding situation.
But here's the thing.
And it gives you a clear way of like, I can kill this person without having to do a bunch of extra critical strikes.
When somebody is bleeding, they become so useless.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to keep any dice with strife on them.
Check.
And if they do, suddenly they take a critical hit and then they're down. Like a person who's bleeding goes from bleeding to useless instantly.
I agree.
Here, the trek towards uselessness is very slowed down.
It's slowed down unless you keep getting attacked. Is the only thing is if you're not removing yourself from danger, if you're staying in the front line and like attacking enemies and getting critical strike from enemies,
exactly,
then you still have a problem.
Exactly.
But that should warn you, okay, I'm bleeding, I need to back up, get healed, and then go back into the fight.
And the bleeding out that you take, the fatigue that you take every round, be it 1 or 2 or how many we decide in the end, you can still spend an opportunity to negate that bleeding.
That. Exactly. Yeah.
Which I think is paramount. That's like, instead of strife giving you bleeding, opportunity takes it away, which leads into my consequences thing.
Incidentally, I also think this makes Earth Stance much more powerful when you're bleeding. Much more viable. Because,
mind you, we want to take a look at stances too one day and get through those.
Yeah.
But not today.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is because if you're, as stances work currently, if you're on Earth Stance and you're stopping anyone from spending opportunity to hurt you, to negatively impact you, this becomes a lot more like you could probably stand on the front lines a little longer and not worry about taking an extra critical strike deadliness, which is good. I think that works. It makes more sense why Hida can stand on the front line with a giant gaping wound in their chest and still keep fighting, because they're holding on. They're tough.
Okay. Anything else that we want to add to bleeding? Do you think my rule is good, or do you think your rule is?
I think this is good. I think this fits.
Okay.
I think it's very fitting.
Remember, if we're off base, if you think things should be changed, you can always tell us. We're listening.
Yeah, send us a comment. Join the Discord. Get involved in the discussion as well. We have a pretty active Discord community which talks about L5R very often. So feel free to join us.
Do we need to change afflicted at all? So I don't know if you remember what afflicted does.
Oh yeah, I do. But go ahead and explain to the audience, because some of them.
The character is possessed or otherwise tormented by a vengeful ghost, Canson, or other malevolent spiritual entity. This also is like the first stage towards getting taint in many of the adventures. It's like, oh, did you fail your roll to resist taint? Well, the first step is you become afflicted, and then the next one you get a Shadowlands taint disadvantage if you fail 2 in a row. So that's how that works. Given time, this evil force threatens to plant the seeds of Shadowlands taint. Exactly. Effects. The afflicted character's vigilance counts as 1. When they make a check after step 5, choosing kept die, the GM may alter one of their kept die to opportunity strife. Additionally, when an afflicted character becomes compromised, one of the following effects occur depending on the ring that is associated with. Air, a character falls into melancholy, unable to discern past from present. When a character becomes compromised, they mistake someone in the scene from a person from their past, accusing something of a half-remembered sin or taunting them over some ancient failure of a scene. It's all RP based, and I think that's great. The character's health collapses on water stance, and they begin to wither away. When a character becomes compromised, they become violently ill and suffer a critical strike severity 5. Which, I don't know how violently ill, if you, like, at 0 to 2 or 3, your clothes or armor gets damaged, or, like, your hair gets, like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're being so violently ill that your clothes get damaged, because you're like...
My armor's damaged because I was violently ill. I guess I puked all over it.
Yeah, or something else happened. Violent.
The character on fire stance or fire affliction, the character becomes possessed by desire, pursuing their own destruction. When they become compromised, they also become enraged. That's fine. The character's flesh becomes pale and begins to show signs of decay on Earth stance. When they become compromised, reduce their endurance by 1 until the afflicted condition is removed. The effect is cumulative, and if it reaches 0, the character perishes.
Yeah, that one is very brutal because that's
So
like
every
the only
time
way
you
you're
become-
definitely going to die unless you get this removed.
And Void, ill fortune follows the character's every move, and anything that seems a boon rapidly sours. The character becomes compromised. They lose all their Void points. I mean, this isn't bad. I don't see a reason to tinker with this, at least right now.
It's not bad, but it can definitely be improved in that balancing them out so that they're equally as like frustrating for a character.
Yeah.
Or potentially deadly for a character would make more sense. Like not just becoming enraged, but literally being required to like act out in aggression for the fire one. Like whenever you become compromised, you instantly have that response, the unmasking, where you have to threaten somebody's life.
I don't know.
Would make sense for that one.
I don't know. I think
if you're going crazy, you know what I mean? It's like really driving you insane.
I think pushing everything up to the level of that Earth one is not the way to go. I think bringing the Earth one down a little bit to match the other ones. Like if your endurance reaches 0, you're in a coma, in eternal slumber until the afflicted condition is removed, I think is a much better way to go.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair.
I'm not gonna write that down though. Maybe. Okay, I'll write it down. Why not? Afflicted Earth, instead of killing the character, it puts them in a coma.
Yeah, they get sleepy time. Get ready to go to Sleepy Time Junction.
Okay. Burning. After a burning character performs an action, a character suffers 3 strife and 3 physical damage that ignores their resistance. The severity of critical strike caused by this damage is 5. Each critical strike a character suffers this way beyond the first, before the condition is removed, has its severity increased by 5. I always thought that, like, for consecutive critical hits, that the severity should be increased every time, but yeah. Whatever.
I don't mind that idea, actually. The increased severity every time you take one beyond the first one.
Yeah, but
should be worse.
But here, like, it doesn't say,
like, cumulative.
This doesn't say how you take a critical hit from burning.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's just saying each time you take a critical hit in the future, like it doesn't matter if it's somebody else cutting you. If you take another critical strike, you're getting an extra 5. It's just like
no. It says the severity of critical strikes caused by this damage is 5, and each critical strike they suffer beyond the first one suffers this way beyond the first one. Before the condition is removed, has its severity increased by 5. So basically, you have to become incapacitated, and the next time you take burning damage from incapacitated, you'll start taking those critical hits every turn, which I think is fair because you're on fire.
Yeah, you're literally getting burned alive. Yeah, that's fair.
Mind you, 3 strife and 3 physical damage is a hell of a lot.
Yeah,
but I mean, you're burning.
You're burning to death, yeah. You're on fire. You should be freaking out, and you should be in pain.
But here's the thing.
The other thing is stop, drop, and roll, which is they have it as the remove condition.
Here's the thing.
One of the flames.
Here's the thing. It's a TN2 water check to put it out, which I think is a lot. I think it should be a TN1.
Yeah.
But whatever. Here's what I think of this. It's fine because it's simple. That said, it feels like you're totally in a conflagration at this time.
Yeah.
Rather than burning can be in stages. Like, my arm's on fire. Oh. Am I taking 3 strife and 3 physical damage every turn? Does my entire body being on fire do 3 physical damage and 3, or just my arm, or both? Like, it could be like a character that's burning. I could see like a game master saying it's 1 to 3 depending on how much the character is burning.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I change.
How far along in the burn process are you?
Yes. So burning condition should be 1 to 3 fatigue and strife, depending on how much they are burning. And that's it. I.e. 1 limb.
Should there be rules around how
body.
fast fire will spread?
I'm sure like
GMs can manage that on their own.
I don't know. I can write something. Here, let me write something down real quick. Let me see what you think. Fire spreads by 1 point of fatigue and strife to a max of 3 every round, unless an opportunity is spent to stop the spread. They still take the damage amount from the previous turn.
Yeah.
Removed as normal.
You don't want to drop the TN by 1?
Kinda, yeah.
I would say remove the TN by 1, and then make it harder. Make that TN go up the further inflagrated you are.
2, 1 to. I'm just gonna say 1 to 2. Fitness, water, check. Depending on how much fire there is.
I'd almost want to say, and this is punitive for me, but I'd also want to say people attempting to put out somebody who is at a 3 damage per turn take damage as well to try to put you out. Because they're putting themselves in the fire, in the smoke to try to get that out at that point. Like, there's no way they're avoiding.
Attempting to smother the flames of a fully engulfed character takes 1 fatigue in the attempt. How's that?
Sure. That's fair.
Sounds great. All right. Compromised. This is what happens when I got a bell. Sorry, let me turn that off real quick. I apologize. Okay. Compromised. The character is emotionally distraught and distracted. A compromised character cannot keep dice containing strife symbols. When compromised, the character's vigilance counts as 1. A compromised character removes this condition when their strife is reduced lower than or equal to their composure. This is basically, you take strife, it goes over your composure, you are compromised. Any notes here? What do you think?
I feel like this is probably fine as it is.
I think it is too.
I don't think that this is a problem. I like the strife. I like the build-up. I like the compromise system works fairly well.
Here's the interesting part of this. It says in parentheses, to a possible minimum of 0 kept dice. This means, while compromised, this is the only time, when you are compromised, is the only time where you can keep 0 dice.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you always have to keep 1 dice. But compromise says you don't have to keep any dice. You can keep 0.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Which is interesting because it means that if you're compromised and you roll all strife,
Well, you can't keep
that's
those
the
anyways.
one way not to take. Well, that's the thing is if you roll all strife, you don't have to keep a die with strife on it that would trigger your bleeding previously. That's the only way to stop your bleeding critical strike.
Oh
spiral.
yeah, if you're compromised, just
If you're
become
compromised, then
compromised.
you don't need to keep a dice with strife on it.
Unless you're
at all.
using our new bleeding rules, in which case it's immaterial.
You don't have to worry about it
So-
to begin with.
I think compromised is fine. Tell us in the comments what you think about compromised. Yeah. Dazed.
We got some people chatting in the chat, by the way.
Oh, I know. I see Johnny and Rob. Thank you for joining us. Dazed. The character's vision is obscured or their focus is hampered, putting them on the defensive. A dazed character increases their TN for attack and scheme actions by 2. I think 2 is huge in this game. What do you think?
I do too. I like it being at 2 because it's so easy to remove. Just don't do something the next turn.
Yeah, don't do something next turn. But again, like being basically i.e. stunned for a turn, not being able to take an action, like in a role-playing game is really, really hard. Like, I don't know. You like the 2?
It's also not easy to like confer the dazed condition in most situations. You have to have a technique or an ability that gives you that ability to daze somebody. So I feel like it's reasonable to increase that TN by 2 because most of the time this is coming from somebody using a technique to kind of get you out of the fight for a turn.
So dazed it doesn't hamper any movement or support actions.
Mm-hmm.
So you can like do
Move
a
and
roll
guard
to run
somebody.
the hell away you can do that or support another character. That said, aiding another person I think is considered an attack and scheme and support. Let me check out aiding real quick because I believe it's like a bunch of different action types to do it, which is like what? Strike, guard, assist. As an attack, scheme, and support action.
Yeah, attack, intrigue, and support on intrigue.
To assist somebody is not a support action. It's attack, scheme, and support action, which means if you take an assist while dazed, you will not become undazed.
Yeah.
What is a?
But you can do a calming strike or calming breath.
You can do a calming breath. That is a pure support action. You can do a guard.
You can guard.
You can guard.
Like I said.
That's a good
guard.
one to use. Yeah. Okay.
You can maneuver.
I'm sold. Dazed is fine.
Yeah.
I'm sold. You've sold me on it. Dazed is 100% fine. Okay. We have reached the 1 hour that we usually do these streams at, and we haven't gotten very far on this. This is why I was like, oh, we got to get through these comments.
Yeah.
Do we want to go further, or do we want to do this next week?
We can do this again next week, picking up from this on Disoriented and continuing downward. I think, I personally, I think some of these are perfectly fine. There's going to be a few that we're going to need to modify.
Yes, yes. So Dazed is fine. Compromise is fine. I think Disoriented is also going to be fine because it's the exact same thing as Dazed, but for movement and support actions.
Yeah, I agree. You can still attack somebody. You can still do a whole lot of stuff. You just can't run away or do support actions.
Do you want to do this every week? And I think I'll reschedule Howard's.
Sure.
You want to do this every week?
Because
I know
this
that
comes up.
This live stream is one of my more popular ones. People seem to enjoy talking about this. And I've been doing it every
we get a lot
2
of
weeks.
engagement from the community. I'm happy to do this every week as long as something pressing doesn't come up that week. We should be good.
And we'll definitely like we said, we're very open to suggestions and changes. The only thing we're
Feedback,
not
yeah.
open to is people going, no, don't change anything. How dare you?
Or you're stupid and poopy, and I'm offering no feedback at all. Just accept that you're stupid and poopy.
We haven't had any of that. We haven't had any of that.
Yeah.
But we have we have had, why are you changing this? Everything's fine. The sky is not falling.
We don't need new rules.
We don't need new rules.
Grognards for life.
Yeah, Grognards for life. Go play first edition. No.
Exactly.
These conversations, I think, are super important.
I agree.
I mean, no one's saying you should use these rules. We're not affiliated with the company. We're just putting ideas out there. That's what we're doing. And maybe good stuff will come from it.
Opportunities to improve the system.
Maybe good stuff will come from it. Maybe not. But if systems never changed, we wouldn't get great stuff in our systems like, the backgrounds in Dungeons and Dragons, the inspiration point, which, I mean, inspiration is just stolen from L5R. They were void points, right?
Yeah.
Which they stole from Star Wars, which were force points.
Yeah, it's true. These are very real.
So, yeah.
Be able to roll extra die.
Things need to evolve. They need to they don't need to change for change's sake, but they need to change for quality as
quality of life, and to try to improve the system to make the game feel better to play.
I'll tell you what. Would you rather watch a television on the first would you rather watch TV on the first television ever made or TV on the latest television?
Or would you rather only watch the pilot episodes of every show, or watch the shows as they grow and get more ready
that's a
with their
great
characters?
metaphor. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't come at us saying that we're destroying something or anything like that. This is we will not be listening to that. But if you're like, hey, maybe you went too far here, maybe you didn't go far enough over here. Maybe you should go back and look at this, or maybe you were in error in changing this rule because of these things. We're all open to all of that kind of thing. Super duper, exactly. So tell us your thoughts. Tell us how you would change the bleeding condition if you would change it. We are all pretty much sure that bleeding needs to change. It's just how.
Oh, yeah. Bleeding definitely needs to change. And there's a lot of things that need to change in this edition. Just because there was obviously oversights in creating this game. There's always oversights in any game that you're making.
Yeah. No,
things that just didn't get.
No shade on the creators or writers.
Of course, yeah, no.
We've had tons of fun with this game. And we're so grateful.
Years worth. For sure. It's been a delight to be able to play this game for as many years as we have, and we just want to make sure that we give back to that community that we've been a part of for so long.
So, from me and Tarek, go enjoy your own games and go roll some dice.